Welcome to the session, end-to-end overview on SAP system conversion to SAP S/4HANA Part 2. It is about system conversion, and it is especially for those of you who are familiar with the system conversion or at least have listened to Part 1. My name is Boris. I'm working as a product manager for the software update manager and focusing on system conversion. Usual disclaimer could be that I mention things that are new or will be probably available, but we cannot promise this. Coming to the content, packed with 3 sections: news on the conversion target SAP S/4HANA 1909, then news on the conversion tools, and the aspect of downtime is relevant, so that is the 3rd section we have in here. Starting with a new conversion target SAP S/4HANA 1909, which is out since a few days now. The conversion target SAP S/4HANA 1909 is based on specific components, and since I like numbers juggling, I've listed them here. Well, you do not really have to take care, because the maintenance planner takes this. If you plan the conversion, the maintenance planner knows exactly which components to consider. Just for completeness, it's based on basis 754. It's based on the ABAP platform, and we have something new, the S/4HANA Foundation. The ABAP platform as such is not shipped separately, so you cannot install a pure application server on basis 754. And the S/4HANA Foundation is a kind of successor of the ABAP server in the NetWeaver world. Of course, you know that NetWeaver does not apply to SAP S/4HANA, so we do not have NetWeaver in the S/4HANA family, but the S/4HANA Foundation as such is a kind of successor. But still, the Foundation 1909 cannot be used as a standalone server. It's only, the purpose is to be used as part of S/4HANA 1909 or other products or components that are based on this. That's why we have listed the respective node where those components are listed. So overall, SAP S/4HANA Foundation is new with 1909. That was not there in the previous versions. And the ABAP platform was application server ABAP 752 for 1709, which was capable to be installed separately, which is not the case for ABAP platform 1809 and 1909. These were some numbers. For the conversion target, we have the simplification item catalog, and you know the simplification item catalog contains what has changed in S/4HANA, and these informations are release specific, but compared between 1809 and 1909, there are only minor new things, so very few new items. Actually, when I created the slides, I wrote down approximately 3 new items. Meanwhile, I'm not that sure if I look to the simplification item catalog. At least the general statement is there are no new industries or big add-ons that require a simplification. That's why there are no big news in there. Some background information: the catalog as such is based now on Solaris taxonomy that is introduced in the catalog. It's relevant for the Transformation Navigator. That is a tool that is not focusing on the system conversion. It's a tool that helps you about the complete landscape, how to be transitioned in there. In the simplification item catalog, the concept of activities was introduced. And the background is here that we have a lot of simplification items, but the granularity was pretty different. Some items just required that you adapt some tables or start reports. Some items, like business partner approach, may be a separate small project on its own. These activities are used in the readiness check as well. So not only the simplification items are listed, but the activities are listed there as well. So that concept is used in the readiness check. Small screenshot on the catalog, but just for completeness reasons. That was the introduction part with some numbers and general statements. I think it's more important to have a look on the conversion tools that you know. There are no new conversion tools with 1909, but some new aspects to be considered. We start with the SAP readiness check. Of course, you know that the readiness check is recommended to be started very early, even before your project start. It's an umbrella for other tools as well. And The readiness check that is out since a while with version 2.0 is improved step by step, and the aim is to cover the checks as accurate as the dedicated checks. For example, the maintenance planner is checking the component level. The same check is executed in readiness check. For the checks of the simplification item catalog, meanwhile, the readiness check is capable to display even the consistency check, not only the relevance check of simplification item check. So it's improving step by step, and that will be improved in the future as well. New functionality. We now call this an interactive dashboard because you can manually set specific items to be in scope or out of scope. You can add comments in there. You may refresh the analysis by creating a new analysis file in the back end and importing it, so you have a kind of history in there. So quite good new functionality in there. So it's improved step by step. And I can advertise the session on the readiness check as well. That is listed here. The maintenance planner, there are no big news, just some remarks in there. When you enter the entry page, the welcome page, there are different tiles. And our recommendation is to start with the plan for S/4HANA tile, that you plan and then you decide to go to convert. You may as well first select the system, so use the tile for the system and then start a maintenance for the system and select a conversion. That's a possibility as well, but this is not what we recommend. We recommend you to use this S/4HANA tile. If you start from the system view instead, there are not all aspects considered, like the front-end server deployment will not be an option shown. That's why, as you already do it, you use the tile plan for S/4HANA. The display for certified third-party add-ons is rather new functionality out there for quite some weeks or months maybe already. You know that the maintenance planner is checking your source system, and add-ons are a crucial factor. Especially third-party add-ons are tricky because SAP and the maintenance planner do not know whether for third-party add-ons there is already a supported version for the target release like 1909. But at least there are some add-ons that have been certified by the ICC, the Integration and Certification Center, and those add-ons, they get a separate entry in the list in here. This text reads, check the SAP Certified Solution Directory for this add-on. So for SAP add-ons, the maintenance planner knows the status, whether there is a version supported for the target release 1909, for example. For those add-ons that are certified, SAP and the maintenance planner at least tell you it's certified and check the directory to see if there is a supported version. Nevertheless, the tricky part is with add-ons that are not known to the SAP world, but I have a dedicated slide on this in a minute as well. A side remark, you may have heard that there is a maintenance planner 2.0. Like with readiness check, we had 2.0 out there. Maintenance planner 2.0 is currently in beta phase for dedicated scenarios only, but not yet for system conversion planning. And even if we make maintenance planner 2.0 available next year, for the conversion planning you will use the old existing well-known user interface. Just that you do not get scared another tool version, is there something to learn. Now, as short advertising for the session on the maintenance planner here, especially for transforming hybrid landscapes, and then the aspect of add-ons in maintenance planner. Requires a little explanation. You know that up above the maintenance planner is checking the source system on add-on level, but the software update manager later is considering add-on handling as well. Then, left-hand side, we have your ERP source system that is to be converted, and it potentially consists of different kinds of add-ons. Starting at the bottom, there are SAP add-ons, and since they have been developed by SAP, we from SAP know the status. There's a line to the PPMS PPMS is our internal tool where we have all the components, products, product versions, relationships, and all the information about add-ons as well. So the PPMS is our internal single point of truth, and it contains the information about add-ons. And the maintenance planner is, of course, using this information, so the maintenance planner knows whether SAP add-ons have a version that is supported for the target release. Next level are third-party add-ons that are part of the SAP price list. There are examples like Vistex, OpenText, others. So there's a strong relationship between those partners in SAP. We have this add-on on the price list, so customers may get the add-on from the partner or from SAP, and the partners deliver information about their releases and their support for target releases. So the PPMS contains information on those specific partner add-ons as well, and so the maintenance planner is aware of those as well. So if I start the maintenance planner and the maintenance planner is checking the source system, the maintenance planner knows exactly whether or not this add-on has a supported version. And if there is no supported version yet, the maintenance planner will stop and will not allow you to plan for the conversion because all add-ons have to be supported. That's the first part of the story. If it's not supported, then the partner or SAP will have to provide a new version either or provide what we call an ACP, attribute change package. You can imagine that partners develop an add-on, and this add-on may be valid for release 1809, and partner will check whether the same add-on in the same version may be valid for 1909 as well. They have to test this, and if there's no change of functionality, then the partner will only deliver this attribute change package, so the meta information that says this add-on in the current version is also supported to run on target 1909. And the software update manager needs this information so that this add-on is fine with the target version. If now we have add-ons that are not part of the SAP world, so we do not have the information inside SAP whether there is a supported version, then the maintenance planner will not stop. It will just show you the list and say, you have to take care on these add-ons. I don't know. Maybe there's a version, maybe not. And will pass through, so it will not stop the planning for the maintenance, for the providing of archives and stack XML, but later the software update manager will need this information. So later, the latest when you start the software update manager in the phase I select, I think, then you have to provide the required information. Either a new software archive for the add-on with a version that is supported for 1909, or you have to provide this ACP file that can be provided by the partner as well, simple text file that includes the meta information. Existing add-on version is supported for 1909 as well. Because when you install the add-on, there was no 1909 already available. So the existing add-on cannot contain this meta information yet, but it can be provided afterwards as this ACP. And that means the maintenance planner will not stop the planning if there are add-ons from partners, but it will tell you, you have to take care, because later when you start the software update manager, it's time to have everything available. And if you then realize, ooh, there's this partner add-on, I don't know why we installed it, I don't know if this partner is still existing, you have an issue and it's late in time, so better check this beforehand. Finally, a short remark on new S/4HANA versions like we have available 1909 since a few days in the initial shipment. That's a new version, and partners that are creating partner add-ons need some time. Typically, they can only start their checking and new development once we have made this release available, and that means partner add-on will be delivered a bit delayed in time due to they have to have time for development testing as well. That's the general statement. That was some remarks on add-ons, and as you know, add-ons may be a blocker in a conversion. That's why we always recommend to start early, and this was some background on the different types of add-ons relevant for a system conversion. Then the simplification item check. It's still the check that you know. You know that we introduced a new check framework with 1709. It's used with 1809. It's used with 1909. No changes concerning the check framework as such. Of course, there are new checks potentially, but the framework and the report is still the same. And you should run the checks very early, and you should choose the correct target release when you start the check in there. Let me see if my connection is still valid here. So if I have this source system and I run the check in client 000, because the simplification item checks will be run by the software update manager later also in client 000. Then I start the report, and this report will provide the target release. And if I enter the report, the default target release is the latest greatest that is available in here. You see 1909. But I have to set this specifically because the checks are target release specific. And what you see as well, there are nodes related to the checks. There's the first node, this famous 2399707. That's the check framework. And this check node is out of date because there are new checks. So targeting 1909, the tool tells me this node is out of date. But the required level for this node depends on the target level. If I am running a project where we target, for example, 1809 initial shipment, then the existing version 66 is obviously out of date, but it can still be used. So there's a minimum version depending on my target release for these SAP nodes. And that is what we see in here. That leads us to further remarks on the simplification items. You should update the related nodes, but for the productive system conversion, you will not update these. You will enter a freeze phase. If you have the sufficient required version of the node in your system, you can freeze this so that no new checks are entered here, and the node in here tells you what is the required level for specific target versions in here. There is a specific helper report if you would like to run an individual check in background. Of course, you can use the user interface here to select a line and say, I would like to repeat a check here with check consistency details, but this is then not background. So you can use this to run this in background in case it's a long-running check in there, depending on your data. And the check consistency details that was just visible in here, I select a line and use this check consistency details. It's an in-depth analysis that is a bit more detail providing than the usual run. Finally, advertising the block from Markus Göbel, who is the expert who has excellent hints and tricks, especially concerning this freeze phase for your productive system, that in the productive system you do not get surprised by new checks that come up. That is relevant in there. Finally, a remark on the previous old releases, S/4HANA 15.11 and 16.10. As mentioned, with these releases we had a previous check framework that was replaced by a new one with 1709. And this previous check framework, if you would use it for targeting one of these old releases, would tell you it's too late, we do not support a conversion to these old S/4HANA releases any longer. So for targeting S/4HANA with a conversion, the general statement is we support the latest 2 stable releases. Question is, what is a stable release? Now, if we have feature package stack 2 or later available, and you know after feature package stack 2 there will be support package 3 and others, that is the maintenance line. There are no new simplifications in there, no features in there, so that's the stable line, that is a stable release. And we have at least feature package stack 2 available for 1709 and 1809. That means the previous releases are no longer supported for a conversion. It's only conversion relevant, this statement there. That was the list of hints for the simplification item check. Something new about finance migration and the finance data checks. The introduction to the slide is, you know that In the standard conversion run, the software update manager will convert parts of the data from the old tables to the new tables, like new table mat doc. But the software update manager will not do the financial data conversion. That has to be executed after the sum run. And there are some financial data checks that are executed on the new release after sum, but before this version is available for end users. So financial data checks are run after sum run before you start the financial data conversion to check the consistency of your systems. That is important, and they are quite intensive in runtime. They are running fast on HANA, but you will have to run a conversion first to be able to run these financial data checks. And we received feedback from customers, from partners, from projects. It's not a good concept to first run the conversion on a sandbox and then run the financial data checks to fix the issues in the ERP source system. The demand was to have an early check that can be run directly on the ERP source system, even if it's not yet on HANA database. And that is the reason why these checks are now available on the source system. That's the statement of this slide. There's a consistency check program that runs on any database. So it's not running only on the S/4HANA level after sum run. And that allows you to clean up your financial data before even you start the software update manager. And the respective node is listed here. It states it's generally available because there was a phase where it was in pilot phase, and now it's generally available. And this allows the colleagues from the application area to start the financial data consistency runs on the source system already. This is not part of the simplification item check. That's separate. That's important to know. And it's based on the feedback that we have received. So to fix the issues, there are some hints. There's a note on resolving these reconciliation errors and additional notes that are to be considered by the colleagues from the application area there. So that is something new we have, offering these financial data checks on the source already, based on your feedback. That is something new. Something else that is new, and I've inserted this slide here yesterday, is about the business partner concept. There is a check report on business partner. So master data consistency check report, again based on your feedback concerning the business partner approach. You know the story that the business partner concept, customer vendor integration, has to be implemented in the ERP source system already. That is a requirement. There's a simplification item check that checks this. And so to ease the checking of the data, this report was introduced now with this SAP note listed in there. Well, the footnote says there are some manual implementations in the note, so it's not automatically available, the report. But the development team is aware of this, and they are considering to make this more convenient in there. So it's a new check, and the planned innovations there is that the check may suppress individual data fields, and the concept of a general CVI cockpit is what we have on the roadmap, specifically for the topic of business partner approach and introducing this in the source system already. So these were two new aspects in there. I would like to emphasize one aspect that is specifically for targeting 1909, and this is related to kind of my tool, the Software Update Manager, and the title is SAM 2.0 SP6 creates the shadow repository on target database. Let's have a short look on this architecture picture. We have the source database. Scenario is source is not yet on HANA. Then we have the application server host on which the software update manager is located and running. And the source system is running here with the source kernel and the instance there. Now the software update manager is creating this shadow system to have more activities in uptime, less in downtime. That's the general concept. The shadow system consists of a shadow instance and the so-called shadow repository. The shadow repository is already on the new target release, so in our case on 1909, and this is already created in uptime to have less work in downtime. And the shadow instance is running with a targeted kernel to work with the shadow repository. That's the usual story. What's new is now that the shadow repository, when targeting 1909, is not created on the source database but on the target database. What's the reason? Well, again, numbers juggling. 1909 is using kernel 7.77. This kernel is working only with HANA databases. The shadow instance that is using this kernel is not capable to connect to the source database because I've told you the scenario source is not yet HANA. So the shadow instance cannot use the shadow repository on the source database. That's why the SUM tool had to create the shadow repository on the target specifically for 1909. So SUM 2.0 SP6 that you have to use for a conversion to 1909 creates the shadow repository on target, but the same SUM SP version will create the shadow repository on the source database if you target in a conversion 1809. So for lower releases, the old story is still true. The requirement was only for targeting 1909. If you configure the software update manager, you will not find anything different in there. There's no manual interaction, there's no dialog parameter. The tool will not ask you about the location of the shadow repository. It's decided by the tool itself. You do not have to take care. Why do I tell you this? Now, there are some cases where we have lower source database requirements here. Again, if we target 1909, the shadow repository is not created on the source database, so we have less requirements on the level of the source database. One example is Oracle. If you have an Oracle level 11.1 and you're targeting 1809, you first have to update your Oracle to 12.1 to do the conversion. Now, same source database, Oracle 11.1 is fine. We do not create the shadow repository on there. You can start from Oracle 11 to target 1909. You do not have to create table spaces on the source database. Some advantages, that's why I tell you. Just because it is a typical question, how about Unicode requirement, this remains. That is there, the source has to be on Unicode and this will stay, no doubt about this. That was the good part of the story. The full story is that currently with SUM 2.0 SP6 we have some restrictions due to this approach. And the slide says restrictions. Again, if you target 1909, you have to use SUM 2.0 SP6 and then downtime optimized DMO and DMO with system move, those two scenarios are currently not supported, targeting 1909. If you are converting to 1809, you can use the same SUM SP6 version with scenario system move. It's just targeting 1909. These two scenarios are currently not supported. It will be supported in the future. We cannot promise any timeline, but we are aware that these scenarios are well used. Well, downtime optimized DMO, something I will explain later. DMOs with system move is moving the complete system, not only the source to target database, but the application server as well. This was the news in there. I've published a blog 2 weeks ago on this, but the general statement is what we have seen here on this slide. And as I'm talking about the software update manager, my favorite tool, I have to advertise that we have a new dialog sequence in there. That means the entry welcome screen in there will first ask you whether your scenario requires a stack or not. That is what we call scenario category. Which scenario do you follow? Well, if we focus on a system conversion only, then there's no doubt we need a stack XML. That's clear. So we will provide the stack XML. The second dialog is then asking whether you would like to do migration. Well, in the conversion case, this is decided by the tool, but that is a general decision here. And the third level is what we call scenario strategy. And there you get the question whether you would like to follow the standard approach or whether you would like to use the downtime optimized approach where downtime is reduced. Let me see if I get connection to my system here. That is my software update manager. It's SP6 and this is the entry screen. Welcome to software update manager. There are some UI features like these icons there where I can click on and I get a list which scenarios require a stack XML, and of course you know that system conversion requires a stack XML. But then there's the option to say, well, no stack configuration, and if I click on this icon you see, for example, benchmarking. So if your source is on non-HANA and then migration is part of your technical conversion, you may consider to do benchmarking first, focusing on the migration part to optimize the migration, the number of R3 loads, for example. That would be a scenario without a configuration file. If I select this, then there's no need to provide this. That is the entry screen, but let's follow this example with conversion here. I've provided the stack XML. That's the first level, the welcome screen. For a conversion, there's no question whether I would like to have a migration, because we need the migration if the source is on non-HANA. So we directly get to the third dialog, the third level, and this is what we call scenario strategy. Scenario strategy, and those of you who are familiar with the tool, you may remember this pre-configuration dialog saying single system, standard, or advanced. That is an important decision, and we have taken important decisions to the beginning of the dialog sequence. Now this looks like standard approach or downtime optimized. What does downtime optimized in this case mean? It means downtime optimized DMO. Again, I've used this name, I have not explained it. It's a technology that is generally available, that will be explained later on a slide, and this moves part of the migration to uptime. And that's why we call this downtime optimized approach. By the way, this dialog here includes the prerequisite check now as well. That is specific for a conversion. Again, the sum prerequisite check will check whether the source operating system, the source database level is sufficient. You can run this. And for those of you who know this check already, you are aware that in the previous SP versions of SAM, you had to use a different URL. Now we have unified this. You have one URL, and then on the dialog you can decide to follow which approach. Let's assume I choose the standard approach and I proceed to the next level. Then the tool will even tell me what the scenario is up above. So whenever I see the dialog, I know what kind of run this is if I get a screenshot from a colleague or something like this. That is some of the new user interface features in there as part of the decision. Shown here, obviously in my example, my source system was not yet on HANA, so the downtime optimized approach is uptime migration or downtime optimized DMO. If my source system would already be on HANA, then the downtime optimized approach that is offered is near zero downtime maintenance. You know, near zero downtime maintenance, NZDM, is a feature inside the Software Update Manager available since quite a while. So there is the approach that in uptime some structural adaptations and table imports are already executed. And this applies to a conversion as well. If the source is already on HANA, you may use NZDM. For those of you who know NZDM, you know that we have hidden this option somewhere later in the dialog. You had to use the advanced mode, only then you could switch on NZDM. Quite strange, now we have simplified this. It's more prominent, it's on the third dialog offering NZDM. Short question. Though the question was whether the creation of the shadow repository on source or database or target database is relevant for this decision, here is not relevant. As I told you, the tool knows whether to create the shadow repository on source or target database. You have no requirement to adapt something, and it's not relevant for any of these options in there. Okay? So that was the new dialog, it kind of was advertising, and as already mentioned, the NZDM dialog is no longer hidden somewhere later. It's more prominent so that you are aware this is one of the options there. And this leads us to the third section on downtime optimization, where I finally explain what downtime optimized DMO is. NZDM was already mentioned there as well, so conversion approaches, downtime optimized conversion approach that is piloted, and downtime optimized DMO. That is the third section now, coming to this usual picture with the blocks on uptime and downtime activities of the SAM tool. So in uptime, for example, the shadow repository is created. The tool knows where. I do not have to take care. Then in downtime, we have the three aspects of the software update manager, like migration, if it is required, the update and the conversion part, and later fin data migration happens in the IMG activities. How can this be optimized? Well, migration part can be optimized by DMO optimization. There is a blog explaining this that is listed in a minute. This blog tells you how to optimize the number of R3 loads and using the statistics file from a run for the next run, the duration files to optimize the table splitting algorithm of the tool, things like this. For the migration and the data conversion, of course, you should consider archiving. The smaller your source database is, the less time you need for the migration and for the data conversion. That will be a balance because you may consider to have some historical data for new features like predictive scenarios in there. But of course, database archiving is something to be considered and to be planned very early in the project. For the data conversion especially, the optimization that we recommend is the number of background and dialog processes to be used in here. That is the list. The DMO optimization is described in this blog that is out there since a while, written from a colleague from the SAM development team. And for this activities on data conversion, we have these two nodes as a central entry point for a lot of hints on how to optimize this part here. So this is the standard approach that we've been looking on. We have different approaches. The standard approach, as told you, with the software update manager, the tool has some improvements in there, so the SAM development team is working on improving this for the standard approach, but we have something called downtime optimized conversion as well. The idea is to move activities from downtime to uptime. Simple approach. It's currently being piloted. We need more experience with real project situations, and the idea is to make this generally available in the future. We will see. We cannot predict when this is the case. That is approach number 2, and the approach number 3 is what we call NZDT. Be careful, NZDT is not NZDM. NZDT is a service-based approach. That means SAP Consulting is offering an approach where they create a clone of the system and they replicate end-user activities. Quite a complex procedure, but it allows to reduce the downtime drastically. So higher effort, higher investment and hardware and money, but smaller downtime. SAP is offering this migration planning workshop that helps you to decide which of these options would be fitting to your scenario. So let's have a look on the second approach, what we call downtime optimized conversion. Migration and conversion happens partially in uptime. That's written in here. So written lab preview, it's not yet generally available. The idea is to move those parts of the downtime that hurt into uptime. And with this approach, the software update manager would even do the financial data conversion that in the standard approach is not executed by the tool. We move the financial data conversion, we move the material ledger logistics conversion to uptime. And if the source system is not yet on HANA, then even migration of those tables is done in uptime. So first migrate to HANA and then convert to the new tables done in uptime. It's done partially in uptime because, of course, uptime means end users are working on the system. They may potentially create entries on those tables that were already migrated to HANA and converted to the new data model. So the tool has its own logic to record these end user activities and replay this later on. So we have a replication inside the tool that takes care, based on database triggers and logs and things like this. It is done by the tool in there. This is a technology that aims to reduce the downtime. I know the usual question is how much, and it depends. You know the usual answer. It is not easy to calculate. We cannot say, well, we will reduce the downtime by 50%. That's not possible because it depends on the database size. It depends on the user activities on those tables. So my question would be, what is your user activities on those tables BSEC? Well, we have to determine. That's why it's part of the project to get an understanding of this. And That's the replication rate, something, how much replication processes can we run in uptime to have a balance there. So a lot of influencing factors. We have not yet enough statistics to get a rough understanding how much is possible. It's depending on the project. So there. That is the pilot approach. What we do, again, in uptime, we migrate those tables that are affected by the new data model, like BSEC and MKPF. They have to be moved into the new tables, ACDoc-A and MATDoc. Only those tables are migrated. But then, in your source system, there may potentially be other tables that are large. They are not affected by the new data model, and you would like to migrate them in uptime as well. And this is possible with this approach, with something we see in here. We call this uptime migration. You see that a part of the migration is done in uptime already. Migration of selected large application tables which are not affected by the new data model. That is a manual activity. I select those tables. I tell the tool those 10 tables shall be migrated in uptime as well. That is potentially part of what we call downtime optimized conversion, pilot mode. But this specific part, uptime migration, this is generally available for conversions. Leading us to the next slide, looks the same. The title is now downtime optimized DMO. And as downtime optimized DMO is similar to downtime optimized conversion, I prefer the term uptime migration. Again, uptime migration is for a standard conversion run, I can select large application tables so that they are migrated already in uptime. Obviously, this approach only applies if my source is not yet on HANA. If my source is on HANA, then there's no migration, then there is no need to migrate large application tables in uptime. So uptime migration for selected large application tables is generally available for SAM 2.0 SP6. It can be used in a conversion. By the way, for a classical migration to ERP on HANA, you can use this as well, downtime optimized DMO. You can only select tables that are not affected by the new data model, and of course it only applies if source is not yet on HANA. The option was already shown on my live system, downtime optimized DMO, so it's part of the first 3 dialogues to select this option. There is a report that supports you in selecting which application tables you provide to the tool, based on table size, maybe migration rate, things like this. And then the tool will, in uptime, do the initial migration of the source table content and a delta migration, so already migrating those new entries that were created by the end user activity on the system. In the downtime, the remaining delta is replicated and the non-triggered tables are migrated. And the user interface of the software update manager contains a monitoring, so the SAM utilities show the replication monitor so that you can see which amount of these large tables is already replicated, again based on the end user activity and on the replication processes that are shifting those changes by end users to HANA then in there. That is what we call downtime optimized DMO, generally available. Now, to be honest, we offer this, you can use it, but it will not be a huge effort on the downtime reduction, because I guess that typically the big portion of the downtime will be financial data migration. And this is not touched by this approach. We may select big application tables to be migrated in uptime, but still in downtime all this conversion runs. So this will probably only be beneficial for your project if you have a source system where only few parts of the source database is located in the financial data tables. And the majority is in other big application tables that you may migrate in uptime. So I do not promise you that this approach solves all your downtime problems, but at least you know that there's a new approach that you may consider, especially since it's generally available. To give the overview for downtime optimization approaches. So left-hand side, we have the classical business suite, your ERP system on any database. The system conversion can follow the standard approach. You can use the uptime migration, that is generally available, or we have this downtime optimized conversion, that is pilot project written down there. Again, you may consider to first move your ERP system on HANA. That is not required as a prerequisite for the conversion, but then you could use downtime optimized DMO as well. And then later on, for starting a system conversion from ERP on HANA, then NZTM can be used, or again, downtime optimized conversion as pilot approach. For updating, upgrading S4HANA systems, we have NZTM and zero downtime option as well. There's an interesting session from my colleague Jens Fieger on this topic here at TechEd as well. Finishing up with 2 slides here, silent data migration. That is something that you may come across, especially if you use SAM for an upgrade. So this slide is not relevant for a conversion, but as you may be involved in an upgrade from 1809 to 1909, only then this slide is relevant for you. Silent data migration. What does it mean? If we have an upgrade from 1809 to 1909, there may be some new simplifications. There may be some new fields in existing tables, and the conversion of the content into these new tables would extend the downtime. To not affect the downtime, the approach is the data migration to the new data model happens after the upgrade to the new release. That's what we call silent data migration. A simple picture shown here. Let's assume the source system is on 1809. And again, this concept is only relevant for upgrade, not for conversion. And we have a table, simple table, 4 fields. They are filled. That's why they are shown in gray. Then the software update manager will do the upgrade, and the new data model of 1909 says there is an additional field for this table. The software update manager will take care that this field is part of the table definition, but the software update manager will not start the conversion filling this field. The filling of the field is done afterwards during the operation of the productive system 1909. It's done in background. It's done silent, and that's why we call this silent data migration. It's happening after the upgrade in background. And since the software update manager in this case will tell you, shall I create the required users for you, you will experience this dialog and you will see silent data migration. One example would be that table AC.A, famous universal journal, has a new field that is introduced with 1909. It's created by the SAM tool, but it's empty. And after the upgrade, so during the operation of the system is working as usual, and the silent data migration background jobs will fill the new field in background, so that this activity is not part of the downtime. The concept says we would like to reduce the downtime. The SAP applications, they can handle whether or not this field is already filled, but this field has to be filled before we do the upgrade to the next release after 1909, 2020 or whatever it will be called. So silent data migration happens after upgrade, silently during operations, and thus reducing the downtime. This is a general concept that we are introducing with S4HANA, with a goal that in the future upgrades inside S4HANA will have a very short downtime, because we are moving away this data migration, this conversion part of the downtime into uptime operations after the upgrade. That's why this is relevant.
The value for this field was not pre-existing. Then how will you fill up this field?
Not sure if I understood the question. This field is created by the software update manager during the upgrade. It's not filled with content. And after the SAM tool is finished, there are background jobs that are running during the operation of the system, and they will fill the field. Hopefully this answers your questions. Otherwise, let us discuss this afterwards, please. That is the silent data migration part. And advertising the session on zero downtime maintenance by my colleague Jens Fieger that mentions this silent data migration as well. That was the content. There are the usual slides with information on learning experience, engaging with the TechEd community, listing all the other sessions on conversion and related sessions. With this, I finished the official part of the session.